So with spring turning into summer here in the UK, you would have thought that perhaps the population of birds coming into my garden would drop, and where it has a small amount, I'm still getting an awful lot in, and that's even though there's an abundance of natural food out there in the wild. Finding lots of birds coming in and feeding for themselves, and also collecting food for their chicks, and which have subsequently turned into fledglings. Seeing a larger number of birds, a larger number of species of birds coming into the garden, and as well as some of the regular visitors like pigeons who are in all year round. It's really nice now to start to see some of the young birds coming in, the little baby fledglings coming in and taking their first steps out into the natural world. The garden itself has evolved too, so gone is the reflection pool, the DIY reflection pool for now, or that may make an appearance sometime. It's been replaced with some nice wooden logs that I'm using for perches, and also for some food for the birds, and also to give me some different options when I'm taking photographs. But without doubt, the biggest change that's happened to my bird photography over this period is the fact that I've got myself an MC-11 adapter, which means that I can now connect my Sigma 150-600 lens to my Sony a6000, and that's given me a huge number of benefits in terms of frames per second, the reach I can get, and the focusing capabilities.
So the benefit of attaching the 150-600 lens to my Sony a6000 using the MC-11 adapter is obviously, the first one is the extra reach, because I'm shooting on an APS-C body that's 1.5 times the magnification, if you will. I don't really want to get into the whole semantics of that, but it's 1.5 times the magnification essentially of what it would be on a full frame equivalent. So at the long end, I'm getting 900mm instead of 600mm, which means I can get in incredibly close. Especially sitting here in the garden, I can get incredibly close to the birds with the reach that this lens now has. Now that's fantastic, and you can get some super sharp close-up images of the birds. But it also presents a problem as well, because it's so magnified now, it's sometimes hard to actually locate where the birds are in the environment, because you've got a smaller area that you can actually see when you're looking at the camera, either through the viewfinder or on the back screen. So that took a little while to get used to, because especially when it's on a tripod, because when you hand hold it, it's a bit easier to point to where you want it to go, but when you're on a tripod it's a little bit more tricky, and that takes a while to get used to the fact that you're sort of hunting a lot for the birds, and often, regardless of any issues about focusing, by the time you've actually got to the bird in the frame, it's disappeared, or where it was in the frame, should I say, it's disappeared. So that's one issue. Another issue with it, well, I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a fantastic benefit of having the extra reach, because you can get some really excellent shots. But then you're finding as well that if you want to get the whole bird in, sometimes, especially with the larger ones like the starlings, you're having to come back on your zoom to about 400mm, somewhere around that. Otherwise you just can't get the whole bird in either with part of its environment, because if you take a shot, it's not just about, you know, taking a shot of the bird. It's not just about taking a shot of the bird, it's taking a shot of the bird nicely composed in its surroundings. So, you know, often you're waiting for it to have a specific pose, sit on a specific perch, but also you've got to think about what else is around it, because if it's too tight in and you've just got the bird, it's nice, it's good, but it's not everything that it could be. Now, there are drawbacks to using this MC-11 adapter. If you go to record video, you know, whilst you're getting fantastic quality because you're getting a lot closer to the birds, there's a noise the whole way through it where it's trying to hunt focus or where it's trying to maintain focus. It's yeah, that's annoying. Also, it's not as snappy in terms of focus as it would be if it's on its native Canon, but I still find it very good. I mean, I personally use spot focusing, the flexible spot focus on the Sony, the small one, so I can then adjust it to get it to the point where it's focusing on the bird's eye. It's pretty good, especially in good light. When the light starts to drop, you start to struggle, but I think that's more a feature of the lens than it is a feature of the adapter, or perhaps a bit of both. Yeah, I use flexible spot focusing and I use continuous focus, and I'm just sitting there with backbone focus on, just trying to get that spot on the eye. And like I said, it doesn't always work, but I'd say 80% of the time I can get focus pretty quickly, which is enough. I mean, there are times when I've waited for a bird to come onto a certain perch, and then it's got there and I haven't been able to focus, which is frustrating. And I could switch to the area focus on this, which is performs a lot better, but I want that focus crisp on the eye, so that's why I use the spot focus. I think I'd rather miss the odd one and get a lot of them on where I want than get a lot of them where it's focused on part of the body, or, you know, it hasn't quite got the focus on the eye that I want. So, but it is pretty good for that. The other thing as well that I've set up on this, and I also set it up on my Canon as well, is I've set the ISO range between the lowest that it will go on the camera, so in this instance 100, and in Canon's instance 50, and then a maximum of 800. So even if I'm shooting, I'm trying to shoot at basically somewhere around between 1/500th of a second and as far as I can go with the light, so up to probably 2,000th of a second if it's a really bright day. And if the ISO is 800, then so be it. I'm trying to get the fastest shutter speed I can, so I'm not getting any movement of the bird in the shot in terms of the shutter. And if unfortunately there's a bit of ISO, then there is a bit of ISO, a bit of noise in that. But if I've limited it up to a maximum of 800, then I can probably deal with that in post-processing. Now, if it's a very dark day, like a couple of days ago, the light was very low, and trying to take a shot then was difficult, because although I wasn't actually clipping any of the blacks, or very few of the blacks, it's such a dark image if you're shooting at too high a shutter speed that when you start to recover it you get a lot of noise. So you've got to be careful of that, but you know, maybe those days just aren't days to shoot on. The thing is now, of course, once you've taken a picture of all of the birds that come into your garden, there's almost only so many times that you can take a shot of a sparrow on a perch, or a robin, or a blue tit. Well, I haven't had that many blue tits. I've had a lot, but I haven't got that many shots of them. Mainly sparrows and starlings and the odd robin. So then you start to look for ways that you can change the shot, that you can get the same bird, because you're not going to get, I'm not suddenly going to get a jay in here, or you know, a duck-billed platypus. Well, that's not a bird, but you get the point. I'm not suddenly going to get, you know, a random bird in here. It's unlikely anyway. So then you start to think, well, I've got to try and take the same shot, or the shot of the same bird, but I need to make the shot different. So that's why I've brought in these additional bits of wood, which I was really lucky to get hold of. Actually, someone in the village just had a load spare, and they just put a message on Facebook saying, anyone want, come and take what you want. So I picked up these 4 bits of wood, and I've tried to place them in positions where they're going to be, the shots are going to be different from just the bird sitting on a perch. So one bit of wood set up against a really nice, bright, dominant yellow background, and then there's another one laying flat, so you know, we'll have the birds hopping along that one, and that will make a different shot again. And then another one's got some, you know, the features of the wood as well is very different to just the perch. You've got lots of, you know, old used up sort of gnarly edges and sort of battered bits of wood, and that will help to make the shot different as well. So although you're taking a shot of the same bird or the same species of bird, you are getting some variety in the shot. It's, you know, it can get, you can find yourself taking hundreds and hundreds of pictures of essentially the same bird in the same pose on the same perch, but you're just waiting for that one shot that's different from the rest. And I guess that's the thing in all photography. You're always looking and being patient for that thing that's slightly different, and that's the beauty of it, really. And yeah, that's why I'm out here a lot. It's been fascinating to watch the birds coming in and out of the garden over this period, I have to say. I would say definitely the activity is down on what it was a couple of weeks ago, definitely. But the amount of birds that have been in, and the amount of fledglings that I've had in the garden, you know, we've got, I'm positive we've got a robin's nest in one of the trees behind here at the back of the garden, because there's definitely a pair of robins, a male and a female, and I've taken shots of a fledgling as well, which is just fantastic. but I've had a baby blackbird in, I've had loads of fledgling starlings in when they were just first coming along, and they've gone from being fed by the parent to feeding themselves to coming in on their own, which is fantastic. I've had baby sparrows in here, I've had a baby blue tit in here, so we've had lots of the fledgling birds as you get this time of year, which has been fantastic. I've had a goldfinch in here finally, but I've had it in 3 or 4 times, but not when I've been taking photos. And then the one time it came in, I was actually literally coming into the hide and it just flew in brazen as anything. By the time I'd gone and got the camera, it had sort of popped off and it came back again briefly, but the light was so low that I didn't get a good shot, A, because the light was low, but B, I didn't get a very good pose of it, but I did get something, which is good. The greenfinches haven't been back, unfortunately, which is a real shame, but we've had collared doves in here as well. There's a baby blackbird that hops around and has a sunbathe, which is fascinating to watch as well. And there's been a whole variety of species coming in to the garden, which is fantastic. And I'm hoping now that I've made this a place that's a bit of an oasis for the birds to come and just visit and just chill out and enjoy a bit of food. I'm planning on sorting out some sort of, hopefully maybe a bit of water somewhere. Trying to grow that back box up. Now I've taken a lot of the shingle out and I've planted some wild meadow seeds now. I'm a bit late in the year to be planting them. I'm about 2 weeks too late when I actually planted them, so they may not germinate, but I'm hoping they do, and that'll grow up and make a lovely sort of area for maybe butterflies and bees to come in, so I can get some shots of those. And yeah, try and get some water in for the birds as well, especially over winter. I'm going to try and do that. So this from where I was, I've really built up a bit of an oasis, really, I think, for the birds to come in, which I'm and all wildlife to come in, which I'm really pleased about. But I will say, like I was saying, the level has just dropped over the past week or so, and I don't know whether that's because food's more abundant elsewhere, or whether because a lot of the birds that were feeding, that were coming in to get food for their fledglings or their babies, have now, those fledglings have now flown the nest and have gone off, and so the birds don't need to come in and get food for them so much anymore. I'm not sure, but it has dropped off. I'm still getting quite a few in, regular visitors. I don't have to sit here long before I get at least a few sparrows and a robin in, but I've seen far less of the starlings, far less of the blue tits, far less, or I haven't seen a goldfinch, a greenfinch for a long time. I'm getting the occasional goldfinch. So yeah, it's interesting, but this is going to be a place now that I can use long term. So the garden I'm hoping to be set up long term for bird watching, so over the winter I might get some different species in as the seasons change, as the food becomes less abundant. I want to set something up in the long term, maybe hopefully to try and attract some of the birds in, like maybe a woodpecker or a nuthatch, get specific tree trunk for that, but we shall see. That's all in the future.